to pack up the restaurant's leftovers. The mother insisted her daughter drive back. Unexpectedly, they collided with a large truck on the way. This accident not only cost her daughter an XIN both legs but also claimed the life of her cousin. Unable to accept his wife's amputation, Shin-sho hesitated to sign the surgery consent form. Seeing this, Xiu-fang signed her own name with trembling hands to save her daughter's life. One accident shattered two once happy families in an instant. Xiuli blamed her sister for everything. If Xiu-fang hadn't insisted on packing those leftovers, her son wouldn't have been hit by that truck and killed. Xiuli grabbed her sister and screamed in despair. And Xin had been an outstanding dancer. To care for her mother, she willingly gave up her position as lead dancer in the troupe and returned home to teach dance. With her graceful figure and captivating presence, she was the center of attention wherever she went. Yet her mother, Xiu-fang, had let herself become a 200-plus-pound obese woman. After a medical checkup, she was diagnosed with severe hypertension and hyperlipidemia, and Xin resolved to help her mother lose weight. But when she enrolled her in a weight loss class, her mother backed out. Frustrated, and Xin confronted her mother. Xiu-fang, however, blamed the instructor entirely. Watching from the sidelines, Xiuli couldn't resist mocking her sister. Hearing her aunt's words, and Xin's anger boiled over. Realizing her daughter's fury, Xiu-fang hastily promised to stop drinking sodas and eating junk food, but Xin had heard these promises countless times before. She no longer believed her mother would change. Shin-sho worked as a bank clerk. After their marriage, Shin-sho's parents contributed the down payment for their wedding home. Xiu-fang now lived with them and occasionally stole food. Shin-sho's parents were deeply displeased with her behavior. Upon learning this, and Xin angrily demanded her mother stop stealing, Xiu-fang lashed out, accusing her daughter of disregarding her feelings. To mend their relationship, and Xin threw a lavish birthday banquet for her mother. Seeing the leftover food on the table, Xiu-fang asked the waitstaff to pack it up. It was precisely this delay caused by packing the leftovers that led to a horrific car accident involving the entire vehicle. And Xin, driving the car, had her leg amputated. Her nephew in the passenger seat died instantly. Xiu-fang, however, only suffered minor scrapes. Xiuli blamed her sister for everything. Seeing her daughter lying in the hospital bed, Xiu-fang felt deeply guilty and left silently. When an Xin woke up and called out for her mother, Xiu-fang was nowhere to be found. Shin-sho's parents called her, but she didn't answer. She didn't reply to messages either. It turned out Xiu-fang had returned to her fried chicken shop, eating chicken non-stop to mask her inner pain and guilt. Xiuli's daughter Ruohua proved remarkably understanding. Though she too had lost her brother, she suggested, "Auntie, go visit an Xin at the hospital." Consumed by guilt, Xiu-fang couldn't bear to face her daughter. Ultimately, comforted by Ruohua, Xiu-fang went to the hospital. When she finally mustered the courage to see her daughter, an Xin asked about her legs. Unable to answer an Xin's question, Xiu-fang quickly changed the subject, asking if she needed to use the restroom. But her body was too heavy and she lost her strength, causing an Xin to fall heavily to the floor. Shin-sho, who had been sleeping on the sofa nearby, heard the commotion and hurriedly got up to carry an Xin back to bed. Fearing something had happened to his wife, Shin-sho rushed to find the doctor. Meanwhile, Xiu-fang kept apologizing to her daughter, blaming herself for being useless. Just then, the nurse entered. She pushed Xiu-fang aside and lifted an Xin up. Watching the nurse effortlessly cradle her daughter while she herself was powerless, Xiu-fang felt an overwhelming shame. At first, Shin-sho had cared for his wife with meticulous attention. Even after an Xin's leg amputation, he remained steadfastly by her side. But an Xin, deprived of her legs, was consumed by profound self-loathing. She spent her days in tears, unable to accept her reality. Seeing this, Shin-sho swore he would never leave her. Indeed, a man's promises can be made so easily. The Shin-sho of today was truly a good man, but that wouldn't stop him from resenting an Xin later. The next day, during an Xin's dressing change, she feared Shin-sho might be unable to bear seeing her stump and asked him to step out. Shin-sho solemnly assured her it was fine, then suggested it was a chance to learn how to change her dressing at home. Yet upon seeing the wound, he still felt a physical urge to vomit. An Xin noticed his reaction and told him to wait outside. Shin-sho pretended to be shocked and refused to leave, but eventually couldn't resist the nausea and stepped out. The moment he exited the door, he began vomiting violently. Xiu-fang witnessed the entire scene. Helpless, She returned to the ward to stay with her daughter. And Xin endured excruciating pain during the dressing change. Outside the ward, Xinsho listened to her agonized cries, his heart wrenching. After the dressing was changed, Xiufeng emerged and asked Xinsho to go home and rest, promising to stay at the hospital to care for an Xin. Hearing this, Xinsho casually mentioned how busy he'd been at the bank lately, gave some parting advice, and left the hospital. Xiufeng's heart ached deeply at that moment. It turned out an Xin's attending physician had summoned her. He informed her that due to uterine damage from the car accident, an Xin would never be able to conceive again. Xiufeng knew an Xin and Xinsho had planned to have a child within the next 2 years. To spare them this devastating news, she secretly hid the test results upon returning home. She intended to explain the situation to them when the time was right. From then on, Xiufeng tried every day to cheer her daughter up, yet an Xin remained cold and distant, her words sharp and cutting. Meanwhile, Xiuli stood by the riverbank, her heart heavy with grief for her lost son. Ruohua approached, urging her mother to find solace and care for herself. It turned out that while her son was alive, Xiuli had poured all her attention into him, projecting her unfulfilled dreams onto him. But her son, Ruoxian, felt suffocated by the weight. He diligently studied according to his mother's demands, excelling both academically and morally at school. Yet under his mother's intense pressure, Ruoxian gradually developed psychological issues. That day, Ruoxian was participating in the Olympiad competition. Knowing her brother's stress, Ruohua specifically came to the school to pick him up. But even after the competition ended, he still hadn't emerged. After inquiries, she learned Ruoxian had submitted his exam early and left. Fearing for his safety, Ruohua rushed inside to find him. Stepping into the hallway, she saw Ruoxian standing on the rooftop. She brought him back home. Xiuli had prepared a lavish feast to celebrate her son. Seeing his mother, Ruoxian instinctively reacted physically. To conceal his unease, he lied that he needed to use the restroom. Once inside, he exhaled deeply before taking out a packet of pills. The array of trophies and certificates on the table seemed like a mocking display. Then, to appease his mother, Ruoxian put on a cheerful facade, claiming he had performed exceptionally well in today's competition. Hearing this, Xiuli's eyes welled up with tears of joy. Ruoxian instinctively glanced at his sister, Ruohua. Ruohua quickly changed the subject, mentioning her graduate school entrance exam scores had barely met the admission threshold, leaving her no choice but to seek employment first before pursuing further studies. To her surprise, Xiuli dismissed this entirely, insisting a woman needn't pursue such advanced degrees. What mattered most now was finding a good family to marry into. Ruoxian felt his mother favored sons over daughters. After dinner, while washing dishes, Ruohua recalled her teacher's words. It turned out Ruoxian had suffered severe psychological pressure during today's exam, vomiting and having diarrhea, forcing him to submit his paper early without completing it. Fearing her mother couldn't handle such a blow, she hadn't revealed the truth during dinner. Meanwhile, to celebrate her son's successful competition, Xiuli had specially bought a new phone, but Ruoxian didn't want it, thinking his sister would soon start working and wanting to give the phone to her. Ruohua overheard their entire conversation nearby. Xiuli had abandoned her beloved career in education to give birth to Ruoxian. She poured her entire being into her son, placing immense expectations upon him. Ruoxian, driven by this love, pushed himself to his absolute limits. Yet every time he heard his mother speak of it, he felt a crushing sense of failure. He felt suffocated, even contemplating ending it all. Noticing her brother's distress, Ruohua came to comfort him. Ruoxian poured out his inner torment to his sister. In truth, Ruoxian's death was indirectly caused by Xiuli. After his aunt's birthday banquet, Ruoxian didn't want to ride with his mother and chose to take an Xion's car instead. That single choice ended his life. Perhaps, for Ruoxian, it was a kind of liberation. Ruoxian's death plunged Xiuli into profound grief. Only upon seeing Ruohua did she realize how, over the years, she had neglected her daughter while focusing on her son. She tossed aside her umbrella, clutched Ruohua tightly, and apologized incessantly. And Xin, having lost both legs, couldn't accept her fate. To encourage her daughter to stand again, Xiufeng promised to lose 100 pounds in 3 months. To fulfill this wager, Xiuli embarked on a desperate weight loss regimen. When hungry, she drank chili water and subsisted on cucumbers. But her extreme method soon backfired. She fainted from hypoglycemia. When she awoke, An elderly man advised her this approach was unsustainable. She needed professional guidance, so Xiu Fang approached the gym manager, explicitly demanding to lose 100 pounds in 3 months. The manager hesitated, unsure of the outcome. Unexpectedly, Xiu Li pestered the trainer relentlessly until he finally refused. A man working out nearby overheard the mention of 30,000 yuan and his eyes lit up instantly. This man, Lin Yu, had once been a dance instructor. He was fired after parents complained about his teaching. With no other prospects, he took a job as a personal trainer at the gym, but his earnings barely covered his rent. So when he overheard Xiu Li and the manager discussing the 30,000 yuan, as he was leaving, he deliberately approached Xiu Li, pretending to talk on the phone with a friend. He boasted about being an extreme weight loss coach. Xiu Li was instantly intrigued. Seeing Lin Yu's muscular physique, she quickly believed him. Lin Yu then smoothly quoted a fee of 30,000 yuan, promising to help her lose 100 jin, 50 kilograms, in 5 months. Xiu Fang was deeply tempted and paid the 30,000 yuan on the spot. From then on, to help Xiu Fang lose weight, Lin Yu not only assigned intense training regimens but also prescribed a strict low-calorie diet. Whenever Xiu Fang felt like giving up, she thought of her daughter. An XIN's dance school principal came to visit her. His real purpose, however, wasn't to see an XIN. He wanted to buy an XIN's social media account. Qin Shou always understood that account represented all of an XIN's hard work and knew its importance to her, so he refused the principal. Qin Shou's mother pleaded with the doctor to recommend a top cosmetic hospital to repair an XIN's facial scars. Upon hearing this, Qin Shou pulled his mother aside, scolding her for bringing up an XIN's scars. Because of those scars, an XIN locked herself in her hospital room every day, refusing to let anyone open the curtains or see anyone. Though Qin Ma sympathized with her son, she felt powerless. Shortly after, Xiu Fang visited an XIN at the hospital and learned of Qin Shou's distress from the nurse. Fearing an XIN's isolation would strain their marriage, she pushed her out to bask in the sun, enthusiastically sharing her weight loss training regimen. But an XIN, worried her mother might be deceived, kindly cautioned her to spare her daughter's concern. Xiu Fang lied, claiming tuition was only a few thousand yuan. Only then did an XIN stop worrying. Just then, a nurse called to discuss the weekly meal plan. Seeing this, Xiu Fang prepared to wheel an XIN back inside. But an XIN wanted to stay a little longer and asked her mother to hand over the phone. Without thinking much of it, Xiu Fang gave the phone to her daughter. That's how an XIN discovered her mother had transferred 30,000 yuan in tuition fees to the coach. It turned out Lin Yu and an XIN both taught at the same dance school. She also knew about Lin Yu's dismissal. The next day, Xiu Fang returned to the gym. Since Lin Yu wasn't a contracted instructor, the manager, fearing she might be scammed, came over to warn her, but Xiu Fang paid no heed, even going out of her way to speak highly of Lin Yu to the manager. Ever since she started losing weight with Lin Yu, not only had her weight dropped, but her stamina had also improved. These words were overheard by Lin Yu. Seeing Xiu Fang's dedication, he casually asked why she was dieting. Xiu Fang then revealed that her daughter had lost both legs in a car accident. Her weight loss wasn't just to help an XIN stand again. She feared her current state would prevent her from caring for an XIN. Lin Yu felt an immediate sense of familiarity and urgently asked Xiu Fang her daughter's name. An XIN dismissed her mother's goal of losing 100 pounds in 3 months as a pipe dream. She reported Lin Yu to the dance academy principal for fraud. Upon learning this, Lin Yu brought an XIN to the park where Xiu Fang ran daily for a confrontation. An XIN watched her mother jogging from afar, unable to believe this was the same woman she knew as lazy and gluttonous. To motivate an XIN, Lin Yu deliberately taunted her, implying she was the one living off others. Xiu Fang, determined to rebuild an XIN's confidence in standing again, had been losing weight through sheer willpower. She persisted relentlessly, having already shed 20 pounds. Why couldn't she see others' efforts? Why did she shut herself away every day? After hearing this, an XIN knew she was in the wrong and didn't want anyone to see her in such a state, so she asked Lin Yu to take her back to the car first. Just then, Old Wang finished his run and recognized Lin Yu. Learning that the girl in the wheelchair was an XIN, he hurriedly called her father over. The two of them kept praising an XIN for her beauty and even called over the dancing aunties nearby. Everyone chattered with concern for an XIN, but at that moment, an XIN felt overwhelmingly inferior and just wanted to leave quickly. Lin Yu saw her distress and hurriedly pushed her away. On the way back, and Xin couldn't help but burst into tears. She believed Lin Yu had deliberately embarrassed her in public. She yelled at him and refused his help. It took tremendous effort for her to finally get into the car. Xiu Feng, who had just finished her run, witnessed this scene with deep satisfaction. After all, her daughter had finally taken that crucial step. Soon, and Xin recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Xin Shou and Xiu Feng specially decorated the house and prepared a feast to welcome her home. Xin Shou even took advantage of Xiu Feng's absence in the kitchen to pour an Xin a bowl of soup, whispering many sweet nothings to her. This deeply moved an Xin. That night, and Xin waited eagerly in bed for Xin Shou. When he entered to be intimate, he accidentally brushed against her amputated legs, instantly dampening his mood. And Xin saw the flicker of disgust in his eyes, and tears welled up uncontrollably. Early the next morning, and Xin struggled alone to the bathroom to use the toilet. Despite her utmost effort, she couldn't sit down. Fortunately, her mother returned just in time with breakfast. It turned out that after noticing Xin Shou's disgust the night before, and Xin had held her urine all night to avoid troubling him. In the middle of the night, and Xin experienced phantom limb pain. Not wanting Xin Shou to know, she endured the agony, but her cries of pain still woke Xin Shou and Xiu Feng. Xiu Feng rushed over. Seeing her daughter drenched in sweat, she realized an Xin must have endured for hours. After taking medicine, an Xin forced herself to say she was fine, not wanting to worry them. To hide her disheveled state from Xin Shou, she grabbed a pillow and told him to sleep outside. Seeing this, Xin Shou could only sit on the sofa with the pillow, lost in thought. From then on, Xin Shou slept poorly every night, caring for an Xin, appearing listless all day. Returning to his parents' home for dinner after work that day, he was so exhausted he fell fast asleep on the sofa. Xin Ma felt deeply for her son upon seeing this. Xiu Feng also noticed the change in Xin Shou. To ease the tension between them, she offered to take over caring for an Xin at night. She had Xin Shou move to her room to sleep. The next day, determined to help an Xin regain her confidence, Xin Shou arranged for a cosmetic clinic to remove the scars on her face. Unexpectedly, an Xin interpreted this as him rejecting her and lashed out at him with harsh words. Unable to endure any longer, Xin Shou finally unleashed all the pent-up resentment he had been holding inside. Xiu Feng returned from her run, hearing their argument, and rushed in to mediate. But an Xin continued hurling insults at her husband. Enraged, Xin Shou turned and stormed out. Seeing this, Xiu Feng hurried after him to apologize. Overwhelmed, Xin Shou broke down in tears. Xiu Feng then pleaded with an Xin to stop. As a husband, Xin Shou had done his best, yet an Xin felt he no longer loved her. Watching her daughter self-destruct, Xiu Feng patiently urged her to wear the prosthetic and step outside. But an Xin, utterly disillusioned, showed no interest. The next day, Xin Shou's parents visited an Xin. An Xin reluctantly came out to exchange a few polite words before retreating indoors. Xin Shou's mother hinted at divorce between the two. Noticing the tense atmosphere, Xin Shou quickly ushered his parents outside. He made it clear to them that divorcing an Xin was out of the question. Xin Ba, hearing this, felt helpless. He then suggested that since Xiu Feng was caring for an Xin, Xin Shou could stay at home Monday through Friday and come care for an Xin on weekends. This way, it wouldn't interfere with his work. Fearing an Xin might misinterpret his intentions, Xin Shou didn't agree to his father's suggestion on the spot. He simply said he would discuss it with an Xin. Later, Xin Shou relayed this proposal to Xiu Feng. Xiu Feng readily agreed, stating she had already persuaded an Xin and told him to focus on his work first. With her consent, Xin Shou turned back to pack his things and told an Xin he would return on weekends to be with her. Though an Xin put on a nonchalant front, her heart was already being torn apart. This only solidified her belief that Xin Shou despised her and no longer loved her. Watching Xin Shou leave without hesitation, an Xin set down her book, picked up the remote, and closed the last sliver of the curtains. It was as if she were shutting the final door to her heart. After Xin Shou left, Xiu Feng urged an Xin to rally her spirits and show Xin Shou hope. Otherwise, their marriage would never last. But an Xin confessed to her mother that since leaving the hospital, Xin Shou hadn't touched her once. She knew deep down, he couldn't accept her amputation. Determined to prevent her daughter's further decline, Xiu Feng sought help from her personal trainer. Lin Yu didn't coddle an Xin like everyone else. Ever since an Xin's accident, everyone around her had been fawning over her. Suddenly, someone appeared who didn't care about her feelings at all. She didn't know how to handle it, and Lin Yu certainly didn't indulge her. Though Xiu Fang had paid him 300 yuan to care for an xin, he made her cook and do her own laundry. He spent his days sprawled on the couch, either glued to his phone or drinking beer. That night, an xin was struck again by phantom limb pain. Lin Yu noticed and massaged her, urging her to get a prosthetic and commit to rehabilitation. An xin saw a disabled performer she'd followed return to the stage on TV. She resolved to get a prosthetic and stand again. Qin Ma unexpectedly learned she couldn't conceive and immediately confronted Xiu Fang over the phone. This time, having finally caught her red-handed, he wouldn't let it go. On the other end, Xiu Fang kept apologizing, admitting she'd hidden the test results. And xin remained completely unaware of all this. But Qin Ma refused to listen to her explanations, accusing her of concealment and deception. Xin Shou snatched the phone and told Xiu Fang it wasn't her fault. Back when they got married, he and an xin had agreed not to have children. Hearing this, Qin Ma flew into a rage and lunged to grab the phone. Yet Qin Shou vowed over the line he would never leave an xin. Still, Xiu Fang worried Qin Shou might divorce an xin over her infertility. She devised a plan to permanently erase that thought from Qin Shou's mind through the union. She went to the bank where Qin Shou worked and found the union chairman. She tearfully recounted an xin's plight while lavishing praise on Qin Shou. Director Wan was deeply moved and summoned Qin Shou. Qin Shou, expecting his mother-in-law to confront him about his absence, had been staying at his parents' home to avoid work responsibilities while caring for an xin. To his surprise, the director immediately showered him with praise and offered to award him the Year-End Excellence Prize. Xiu Fang had elevated Qin Shou to the moral high ground. To avoid gossip, Qin Shou heeded his father's advice and moved back home. Soon, the story of Qin Feng caring for his wife after her car accident spread throughout the small town. Everyone praised him highly, but Qin Feng couldn't muster any joy. After work, he didn't want to go home and sat in a cafe, lost in thought. His supervisor, Xu Wan, saw him and approached to greet him. Xu Wan felt they shared a similar plight. After her mother fell ill, her brother refused to care for her and forcibly sent the paralyzed woman back to her own home. Xu Wan was already overwhelmed by work, yet she still had to tend to her paralyzed mother. Unexpectedly, her mother showed no understanding and instead made life unbearably difficult for her. Thus, she deeply understood the hardships Qin Shou faced. Hearing Xu Wan's words, Qin Shou felt as if he'd found a kindred spirit. He completely forgot that it had taken him 8 years to win an xin over. An xin had also given up a great opportunity in Beijing for him. Xu Wan then told him the union planned to recognize him as a model employee. The bank president and chairman would visit his home to express their appreciation. Qin Shou couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh upon hearing this. But Xu Wan urged him to seize this chance, saying it could lead to a promotion and raise in the future. Returning home that night, Qin Shou shared the news with an xin. To spare Qin Shou embarrassment, an xin endured excruciating pain, taking many steps with her prosthetic limb to mend their relationship. She claimed her phantom limb pain had completely vanished. Qin Shou was overjoyed upon hearing this. Just as Xiu Fang was changing an xin's dressing, the sickening smell of antiseptic mixed with decaying flesh made him retch and vomit. An xin witnessed everything and still insisted her mother sleep with her that night. The next day, bank executives visited their home to offer condolences. To support Qin Shou, an xin endured the pain and put on her prosthetic leg. But as soon as she reached the doorway, she saw Qin Shou spraying perfume all over the room. His actions seemed desperate to mask any strange odors from the executives. Watching this scene, an xin's heart ached unbearably. Soon after, the bank president and chairman arrived. They filmed a documentary about Qin Shou's daily care for an xin. An xin forced herself to cooperate, but eventually, exhausted, she nearly collapsed. Seeing this, Qin Shou hurriedly carried her back to the room and sent his mother-in-law to see the executives off. After losing her leg in the accident, an xin often took her frustration out on Qin Shou. Compounding this, whenever intimacy arose and Qin Shou accidentally touched her stump, the memory of that room filled with the mingled scent of medicine and rotting flesh would instantly kill his desire. His entire demeanor grew gloomy. His transformation didn't escape the notice of his superior, Xu Wan, exhausted from caring for her paralyzed elderly mother, saw Qin Shou as a kindred spirit. After work, they would sit together, offering each other solace. Gradually, an indescribable bond grew between them. When Qin Shou learned Xu Wan had taken a week's leave, He grew deeply concerned she might have been in an accident. He rushed to her home after work to check on her. Upon entering, he saw her mother's portrait. It turned out that last weekend, Chuan had fallen asleep from exhaustion. When she awoke, her mother had already passed away. Chuan then poured out all the pent-up grievances she had been holding inside. As she spoke, she began slapping herself. Seeing this, Chinsho sat down beside her to comfort her. Chuan poured out her grievances to Chinsho and, overcome with emotion, kissed him. In the heat of the moment, they became intimate. Though Chinsho cursed himself for being unmanly, his guilty conscience drove him to buy flowers for an XIN. By then, an XIN had received a new prosthetic and wanted Chinsho to accompany her to the garden to test it. Having cheated once, Chinsho now utterly despised an XIN. He lied about his father's high blood pressure, refusing an XIN's invitation. He thought he'd hidden it well, but an XIN understood his contempt. Having come to terms with it, she no longer insisted. Early the next morning, Chinsho dreamt of Chuan sitting by his bed, seducing him. Frustrated, he dressed before dawn and prepared to leave. Xiu Fang saw him and urged him to eat breakfast first, but Chinsho couldn't wait a moment longer. Lying that he needed to fix a pipe at his parents' house, he then went straight to Chuan's place. Seeing Chinsho at the door, Chuan eagerly pulled him inside. They didn't even close the door before starting to make out. Xiu Fang finished preparing lunch and immediately called Chinsho to come home for the meal. At that moment, Chinsho was still cavorting with Chuan. He lied that the pipes still weren't fixed and he wouldn't be home for lunch. Chuan confronted him, warning that such lies would eventually be exposed. Meanwhile, Xiu Fang, hoping to ease tensions between the two families, specially brought over the braised duck she had stewed. Upon entering, she didn't see Chinsho. Qin Ma, knowing his son always avoided an XIN by going out, lied that he was at a team-building event at work. After hearing this, Xiu Fang, wanting to confirm her suspicions, tentatively asked if the pipes had been fixed. Qin Ma's response confirmed to Xiu Fang that Chinsho was lying. Chinsho's repeated infidelity made him feel even more guilty. He deliberately bought a cake for an XIN and desperately tried to cheer her up. After dinner, Xiu Fang deliberately prepared 2 dishes for Chinsho to take home for his parents to taste. Unexpectedly, Chinsho didn't return to his parents' home but rushed straight to meet Chuan. The two arranged to go to the supermarket to buy contraceptive supplies, only to be caught red-handed by Qin Ma. Seeing their ambiguous behavior in the supermarket, Qin Ma instantly understood everything. However, she didn't blame her son for cheating but instead criticized him for being desperate. Qin Ma knew Xiu Fang's tactics well. If she found out about this, she'd surely make a scene at the bank. Then Chinsho would become the target of everyone's criticism. So she forced Chinsho to break up with Chuan. Unexpectedly, Chinsho was reluctant, insisting he'd handle their relationship carefully. But Qin Ma wasn't actually concerned about an XIN. She was just afraid this would affect her son's future. Left with no choice, Chinsho conceded to wait until the initial storm passed before divorcing. Suddenly, he recalled Xiu Fang had left 2 dishes at her lover's home. To test whether Chinsho was home, Xiu Fang deliberately called Qin Ba to ask if the dishes suited his taste. Qin Ba, unaware of the situation, was completely baffled. Qin Ma, watching nearby, feared giving away the game and quickly snatched the phone to praise Xiu Fang's sea cucumber dish. However, the dish Xiu Fang had actually brought wasn't sea cucumber, but eel. This only strengthened Xiu Fang's conviction that Chinsho was definitely hiding something. Thus, Xiu Fang decided to follow him. The next day, Chinsho confronted his lover and proposed breaking up. Chuan felt reluctant but put on a calm and composed facade. Xiu Fang witnessed their entire conversation, though she couldn't hear their words from a distance. One thing was certain: their relationship was far from simple. Whenever Chinsho thought of an XIN's disabled legs and infertility, he would unconsciously dream of his lover's exquisite body. Ultimately, he couldn't resist and sought her out again. Seeing Chinsho's state, Chuan gestured him inside. Meanwhile, Xiu Fang, wanting to investigate Chuan's neighborhood, spotted Chinsho's car the moment she stepped out of her own. This only solidified her suspicions, but she was clever. She didn't rush to confront them. Instead, she channeled all her fury into losing weight. From then on, Xiu Fang spent every spare moment lurking beneath Chuan's apartment building. Her persistence paid off when she finally witnessed Chinsho visiting Chuan. She began inquiring with the property manager about the residence on that floor. Just as Xiu Fang pondered how to capture evidence of their affair, she spotted a cleaning crew using a lift to wipe the exterior windows. Taking advantage of their break, she secretly climbed aboard. Inside, Qin Shou and his lover were engaged in intimate moments on the bed. Seeing Qin Shou with Chu Wan tore at Xiu Fang's heart. Meanwhile, Qin Shou had grown deeply attached to his mistress and decided to divorce an Xin. He returned home to inform his parents of his decision. Qin Ba firmly opposed it, fearing it would ruin his son's future. Overhearing their conversation, Qin Ma suggested Qin Shou hint to an Xin to initiate the divorce, but Qin Shou declared he couldn't do it, his conscience wouldn't allow it. Though he claimed reluctance, Qin Shou secretly retrieved an Xin's infertility test report. In his mind, he'd rehearsed countless times how to casually let an Xin stumble upon it. He stared at his reflection in the mirror and smiled, shocked by his own shamelessness. Torn by his contradictions, he slapped himself hard across the face and flung the report away. Qin Ma invited Xiu Fang to their home, mentioning Qin Ba's terminal illness while also bringing up an Xin's infertility, both openly and subtly hinting for Xiu Fang to persuade an Xin to divorce. But Xiu Fang wasn't foolish. She understood Qin Ma's meaning and realized the entire family knew about Qin Shou's infidelity during their marriage. Yet she couldn't let her daughter suffer this injustice silently. Qin Ma saw Xiu Fang had caught on. He offered, if an Xin initiated the divorce, his family would compensate her with 300,000 yuan. Xiu Fang agreed to the divorce only if the shop was transferred to an Xin's name, otherwise, no deal. Upon seeing the report, an Xin immediately sought her mother to verify its authenticity. Xiu Fang had hidden the report earlier, fearing the blow it would deal to an Xin, so she had hidden the report all along, keeping it from her daughter. She never imagined Qin Shou would stoop so low as to use this to coerce an Xin into initiating the divorce. Faced with Qin Shou's despicable actions, Xiu Fang could only curse him as a villain. Still, she revealed the truth to an Xin. The next day, a disheartened Xin arranged to meet Qin Shou in the park and voluntarily proposed divorce. This was precisely what Qin Shou had been waiting to hear, yet he still put on a show of deep affection and reluctance, repeatedly apologizing to an Xin. Even if Qin Shou didn't mind now, what about later? Under pressure from his parents, he would surely cave in. It was better to end their relationship sooner rather than face greater pain later. So she told Qin Shou to process the divorce quickly. Though Qin Shou wore a mask of deep emotion, inside he was overjoyed. Fearing an Xin might change her mind, he dropped his resistance and promised to compensate her generously. But an Xin wanted nothing more than what rightfully belonged to her. To protect Qin Shou's job and future, an Xin went to the bank and spoke highly of him to the president, taking full responsibility for the divorce herself. After returning home, an Xin shared this decision with her mother. Xiu Fang knew Qin Shou no longer loved her daughter. In a way, this was a form of liberation. An Xin now had only her mother by her side. To show her mother the progress she'd made, she told her she could not only walk but also dance. With that, she stepped out of the shadows into the sunlight and began to dance. Watching her daughter finally emerge from the trauma of the car accident that cost her a limb, Xiu Fang felt as though she was seeing that vibrant, confident daughter from childhood once more. The next day, Qin Ma initiated a meeting with Xiu Fang. She presented a card with 300,000 yuan, urging Xiu Fang to have an Xin finalize the divorce from Qin Shou promptly. But Xiu Fang refused to let Qin Shou off so easily. She immediately revealed Qin Shou's affair with his female superior. Qin Ma demanded proof. Xiu Fang had already prepared the evidence, but she refused to produce it because she found the whole affair revolting. As the two stood in a tense standoff, Qin Ba entered, presenting the property deed for the storefront and declaring they could transfer ownership anytime. Seeing this, Qin Ma urgently tried to stop them, insisting they needed this for their retirement. Qin Ba first apologized to an Xin on Qin Shou's behalf, then formally presented the property deed. The next morning, an Xin and Qin Shou arrived early at the Civil Affairs Bureau to finalize their divorce. After leaving, an Xin sincerely wished Qin Shou happiness in his future. Unexpectedly, Qin Shou's expression turned bitter as he mocked an Xin's hypocrisy. He accused his wife of wanting the property all along and should have asked him directly. There was no need to feign nobility while secretly extorting money from his parents. Yet an Xin knew nothing about this scheme. Faced with Qin Shou's accusations, she looked utterly bewildered. Later, an Xin arrived at the store and saw her mother cleaning. Everything became clear. She immediately confronted her mother, blaming her for demanding money in the shop from Qin Shou's family. Xiu Fang insisted that since her son-in-law was at fault, he should compensate her daughter. At that moment, an Xin realized that given her mother-in-law's character, She wouldn't have agreed to her mother's terms so easily. Surely her mother held some leverage over Chinsho. The only plausible leverage was Chinsho's infidelity. And Xin received confirmation from her mother and broke down in tears. Chinsho would rather touch an older woman than lay a finger on her. Seeing her daughter's pain, Xiao Fang comforted her, urging her to forget the past suffering. But an Xin didn't want the shop, it disgusted her. Later, an Xin pressed her mother to return the shop to Chinsho's family, but Xiao Fang refused outright. Not only did an Xin's prosthetic limb require tens of thousands of yuan, her subsequent rehabilitation would cost over 100,000 more. Their disagreement escalated into a bitter argument. Xiao Fang, enraged, packed her bags and left. To repay Chinsho's family quickly, and Xin even forfeited the custom-fitted prosthetic. She scraped together 400,000 yuan and asked Lin Yu to push her wheelchair to Chinsho's home to repay the debt. They happened upon Chinsho returning home with his mistress. Xuan felt awkward upon seeing an Xin. After a moment of shared sorrow, an Xin first handed Chinsho a card with 400,000 yuan. Then she wrote an IOU for 1.6 million yuan, stating that the shop had been purchased by her family and she would gradually repay the money. Qin Ba, standing nearby, hastily declared that the shop was a gift to her. It was Chinsho who had wronged her first, and this was their family's compensation. At that moment, an Xin felt only disgust and refused to accept it. She stated that what was rightfully hers, she would not take a single penny less of. What was not hers, she would not take a single penny more of. Just as Lin Yu was pushing an Xin to leave, Chinsho apologized to an Xin with deep remorse. Unexpectedly, his apology made his lover feel uneasy, and she began hurling insults at an Xin. After an Xin left, Qin Ba, furious, threw the IOU at Chinsho's feet. Shu Wan, fearing Chinsho might change his mind, warned him not to harbor any illusions. He and an Xin were beyond reconciliation. After hearing this, Chinsho grabbed the IOU and rushed out, but he could no longer catch up to an Xin. From that day onward, an Xin began to emerge from the shadow of her amputation. Not only did she pick up dancing again, something she had long abandoned, she also created her own social media account. She uploaded videos of herself dancing with her prosthetic leg, sharing her inspiring journey with netizens. Her videos quickly went viral across the internet, sparking countless comments and trending non-stop. And Xin's body recovered day by day, and her life gradually improved. Meanwhile, Chinsho's life after the divorce wasn't so smooth. He came to Chu Wan's house as usual. Instead of heading straight to the bedroom like before, he hid on the balcony watching an Xin's livestream. He even spent a string of money sending gifts to an Xin. For Chinsho, he wasn't someone loyal to his partner. When he was with an Xin, he only saw her imperfections, forgetting how dazzlingly brilliant she once was, forgetting it took him 8 years to win her over. Seeing that radiant an Xin again on his phone screen reignited his inner feelings, making him feel that the able-bodied Chuan was nothing special. Not only was she plain-looking, but also much older, which ultimately led to their relationship not lasting. Sure enough, Chuan couldn't endure Chinsho's parents' constant criticism and chose to break up with him. Chinsho, in turn, chose to compromise and heed his parents' wishes. In contrast, an Xin grew increasingly better. Through her long-term relationship with Lin Yu, they developed feelings for each other and eventually became a couple. One day, while celebrating her mother's birthday, an Xin encountered Chinsho. Lin Feng offered only brief birthday wishes before leaving. Meanwhile, Ruohua moved into the university dormitory to care for her mother. Fearing her daughter's roommates would be upset, Xiaoli practically took over all the dorm cleaning duties. Initially, everyone liked Xiaoli and even helped her evade dorm inspections by school administrators. But Xiaoli was a highly controlling person, and her issues soon surfaced. Back in the dorm, Lucy finally couldn't hold back and confronted Xiaoli. "My silk quilt can't be exposed to direct sunlight." She then requested Xiaoli stop tidying her bed without permission. "I'm used to being lazy and leaving things scattered." Explaining that Xiaoli's unsolicited bedmaking invaded her privacy, another roommate quickly chimed in, saying she didn't need help either. Xiaoli could only awkwardly nod in acknowledgement. After the conversation, Xiaoli brought out the packed meals she'd prepared for all three, but the moment they opened their lunchboxes, their faces darkened. Lucy, completely turned off by Xiaoli's actions, went straight back to bed. She declared she didn't need Xiaoli to pack her meals anymore. Surprisingly, it wasn't the roommates who got upset, Xiaoli did. When Ruohua was alone in the dorm, Xiaoli finally lost her temper. She explained how she ran to 7 or 8 different counters every day to get their meals, working herself to exhaustion. Seeing this, Ruohua could only drag her mother along to get food. Xiaoli was convinced Lucy must have been talking behind her back, stirring up trouble between her and the others. That day, Lucy and the others were playing cards in the dorm. Out of boredom, they casually started discussing men and work, brazenly declaring they'd rely on their parents. Xiaoli couldn't stand it and muttered a few disapproving words. Lucy immediately shot back, "If we follow that logic, both spouses should bring their parents to live with them. And since both sets of grandparents are still alive, how big a house would you need to accommodate them all? Besides, you haven't even brought your own parents to live with you. What gives you the moral high ground to lecture others?" Though Xiaoli was silenced by this retort, she still believed Lucy and her family were ungrateful. Lucy and her group didn't tolerate Xiaoli's attitude at all. They countered that if her belief was raising children for old age, why act so self-righteous? Besides, she was already the mother with the highest return on investment. After all, Ruohua had won scholarships every year since starting school, and often tutored part-time, barely costing the family anything. Now, before even graduating, she'd brought her mother to live with them. Enraged, Xiaoli erupted into an argument with Lucy. Ruohua rushed to intervene, only for Xiaoli to vent all her fury on her instead. Later, Xiaoli sat alone by the campus lake, lost in thought. Ruohua found her there. Only then did she regret provoking conflict with her roommates, forcing her daughter into an awkward position. Ruohua had no choice but to take her mother house hunting near campus, but sky-high prices meant they couldn't find anything suitable. Just then, Zhou Kai, who'd long harbored feelings for Ruohua, called. He claimed to have found them a place and even borrowed a tricycle to help move their belongings. Xiaoli inspected the new place and was thoroughly pleased. She also sensed Zhou Kai's feelings and invited him to stay for dinner, but Zhou Kai made excuses and left. Afterward, Xiaoli began interrogating her daughter. Following this incident, Ruohua and Zhou Kai grew even closer and officially became a couple. Unexpectedly, upon learning of this, Xiaoli began constantly following Zhou Kai, meticulously documenting every girl he encountered. This behavior greatly annoyed Zhou Kai. The couple frequently argued over this issue. When Xiaoli discovered Zhou Kai's privileged background, she decided to pressure him into finding Ruohua a good job. Ruohua was a girl with strong self-respect. She refused to rely on Zhou Kai. Xiaoli directly confronted Zhou Kai, threatening him to get his parents to find Ruohua a job. Though Zhou Kai despised Xiaoli's tactics, he still brought her to his father's friend's company for an interview, hoping to leverage this connection to secure Ruohua a position. Seeing this, Ruohua hurriedly pulled out her resume, but Boss Wu didn't look at the resume. Instead, he turned his gaze to Zhou Kai. Zhou Kai understood his meaning and personally handed over Ruohua's resume and certificates. Only then did Boss Wu pick up the resume to review it, simultaneously testing Zhou Kai. Seeing Zhou Kai didn't openly acknowledge Ruohua as his girlfriend, Boss Wu immediately became evasive. He politely declined with the excuse that the company currently had no openings. He promised to contact them promptly if a position became available in the future, then left the office. Zhou Kai instantly grasped Boss Wu's reasoning. He deliberately acted affectionate with Ruohua in the office, ensuring Boss Wu witnessed it. Upon seeing this, Boss Wu instantly recognized them as a couple. Needing to collaborate with Zhou Kai's father, he immediately changed his tune and agreed to keep Ruohua on. However, upon learning this, Xiaoli grew even more dissatisfied. She relentlessly pressured her daughter to marry Zhou Kai quickly, but Ruohua resented her mother's stalking of her boyfriend and meddling in their relationship. Resentment breeds rebellion. The more she was forbidden, the more she defied. So she went to Zhou Kai's place in the middle of the night. Her actions made Zhou Kai understand something, but to test Ruohua, he asked, "Drink alcohol or juice?" Ruohua, already suffocating under her controlling mother's grip, chose to pick up the wineglass and drink, a form of retaliation against her mother. Zhou Kai instantly understood his girlfriend's meaning. Xiaoli, unable to sleep, arrived at the school before dawn to find her daughter. Seeing her daughter who hadn't returned all night, her heart sank. She was certain the two had spent the night together. Ruohua felt suffocated by her mother's surveillance. Unwilling to explain further, she decided on the spot to book a ticket and send her back to her hometown. Unexpectedly, Xiaoli not only refused to leave but also burned paper offerings in the rental apartment to mourn her husband and son. She kept ranting about Ruohua's faults and her own grievances. Her grief grew so intense that she didn't notice the thick smoke filling the room. A neighbor saw this and reported it to the property management. The landlord rushed over, insisting on evicting Xiaoli. Fortunately, Zhou Kai arrived in time to plead her case, but Xiaoli refused to admit fault, arguing vehemently instead. Ultimately, Zhou Kai agreed to repair the burned floorboards and immediately transferred 2 months' rent to the landlord as compensation, finally resolving the matter. Yet as soon as the landlord left, Xiaoli began complaining about the neighbors to Zhou Kai. She spoke ill of the neighbors extensively in front of Zhou Kai. Upon learning of this, Ruohua hurried home and encountered the landlord downstairs. There, she inadvertently discovered an unexpected truth. Zhou Kai had been paying the landlord 2,500 yuan monthly. The more Ruohua thought about it, the angrier she grew. Returning home, she ordered her mother to pack their belongings for an immediate return to their hometown. But seeing her mother's scalded hand, her resolve softened. She rushed her mother to the hospital and tended to her with patience. Meanwhile, Xiaoli, eating the pear Ruohua had peeled for her, couldn't help but recall when her son had a fever and was hospitalized as a child. She had peeled pears for him to eat just like this, but her daughter had never received such care. For the first time, she apologized for her partiality. Ruohua, receiving her mother's apology for the first time, couldn't hold back and went outside to cry. When Zhou Kai saw her like this, he assumed Xiaoli was causing trouble again. Ruohua insisted it wasn't, that she just couldn't bear to send her mother back home seeing her in such pain. But Zhou Kai disagreed. His parents were around Xiaoli's age. They had their own endless daily responsibilities. Everything was her own choice. There was no need to use the past to morally blackmail Ruohua. Ultimately, Zhou Kai couldn't bear to see Ruohua hurt and conceited. Unexpectedly, Xiaoli showed no restraint. She confronted Zhou Kai directly, presenting a wedding checklist. But Zhou Kai, fresh out of university, didn't want to marry so soon. His parents also gave him complete freedom, offering no pressure. Upon hearing this, Xiaoli flew into a rage, accusing him of irresponsibility. Zhou Kai responded that both he and Ruohua were adults. Their mutual affection violated neither morality nor the law. Xiaoli, unwilling to let her daughter be treated lightly, began threatening Zhou Kai. If he didn't give Ruohua a proper explanation, she would ruin his entire family's reputation. As soon as Xiaoli left, Ruohua came over. Zhou Kai assumed Ruohua and his mother were conspiring against him. Seeing the marriage demands her mother had written, Ruohua feared Zhou Kai would misunderstand and break up with her. She rushed over to explain she'd never intended to trade their relationship for anything. Though Zhou Kai believed Ruohua, he still resented Xiaoli clinging to her like a leech. For the sake of their relationship, Ruohua had no choice but to comply. Upon returning home, her mother immediately pressured her to marry Zhou Kai as soon as possible. Ruohua was furious. She warned her mother never to bother Zhou Kai again, promising to bring her to Beijing once her job was secured. Though Ruohua claimed she only wanted a pure, unconditional relationship with Zhou Kai now, deep down, she still wanted to hold on to Zhou Kai. So when she saw him, she proactively suggested inviting his parents to a play to thank them for helping her find a job. But Zhou Kai was extremely reluctant. He had asked Boss Wu to arrange a job for Ruohua, leaving his father indebted to him. When his mother found out, she scolded him for being irresponsible. The family had a huge argument over this. Therefore, he couldn't introduce Ruohua to his parents at this time. To reassure her mother, Ruohua spent 1,000 yuan out of her own pocket on a fake bracelet. She lied that she had already met Zhou Kai's parents, and that this bracelet was a gift from her future mother-in-law. Ruohua then explained that Zhou Kai's mother had been traveling abroad for work recently, and that once they returned, they would invite her to dinner to discuss marriage. Xiaoli was overjoyed upon hearing this. She confirmed she'd return home promptly after Ruohua's graduation ceremony. Then she handed Ruohua a bank card with 30,000 yuan for emergencies, urging her to repay the rent Zhou Kai had covered. Finally, on graduation day, Ruohua met Zhou Kai's mother. Zhou Kai warmly introduced Ruohua to his mother. Just as the three were taking photos, Xiaoli approached. After some small talk, Xiaoli pulled Zhou Kai's mother aside to thank her for the expensive gift she'd given Ruohua. Zhou Kai looked at Ruohua in surprise, asking what the gift was. Faced with her mother's direct questioning, Ruohua felt extremely awkward. Overcome with shame, she ran off to hide. In her distress, She threw the bracelet she was wearing into the river. Jokai never imagined Ruohua would turn out to be just as vain as her mother. The two began arguing over the incident. Ruohua frantically explained the bracelet was something she bought online, but Jokai refused to believe her. Convinced Ruohua was cut from the same cloth as her mother, Ruohua desperately tried to hold him back, only for Jokai to shove her to the ground. Just as he bent down to help her up, Xiaoli happened to witness the scene. She stepped forward, shoved Jokai aside, and unleashed a torrent of abuse at him. Then she turned and kicked Jokai out. Back home, Xiaoli urged Ruohua to break up with Jokai. After all, a man who raises his hand once will do it again, even if his family was wealthy. She couldn't bear to see her daughter suffer in such a marriage. She then urged Ruohua to return to their hometown with her to find stable work, but Ruohua refused to go back. She wanted to test whether she could survive in Beijing on her own. The next day, Ruohua quit her job and took her mother to the train station. Fearing her mother wouldn't return, she stayed until she saw her board the train before leaving. Upon learning of Ruohua's resignation, Jokai came begging for reconciliation again, only to be rejected. Unexpectedly, on the very day Jokai reported to his new workplace, Xiaoli had been waiting there for hours. It turned out Xiaoli hadn't boarded the train at all. She'd only emerged after seeing Ruohua leave yesterday. She'd randomly found a cheap hotel to stay in. Her reason for not leaving was her fear that Jokai would continue to harass Ruohua. After this conversation, Jokai realized there was no future between him and Ruohua. He called to persuade Ruohua to leave Beijing. After returning to her dorm, Ruohua received another text from her mother. At that moment, she completely broke down. She refused to live under her mother's control forever. She decided to find a job and settle in Beijing. Having graduated, she could no longer stay on campus. Ruohua began searching for an apartment, but even a rundown shared flat cost 3,600 yuan a month. She wasn't very satisfied with what she saw. While viewing apartments, she happened to run into a middle school classmate. They met up at a coffee shop to catch up. Luzwa worked as a programmer at a software company. Having not seen each other for years, they reminisced about the past and present. Ruohua took the chance to vent her frustrations to him. She didn't know why she felt compelled to stay in Beijing, but she feared returning home to her mother even more. Seeing her distress, Luzwa could only comfort her to try and let go. Ultimately, Ruohua chose to follow her mother's wishes, leaving Beijing and returning home. After returning home, Ruohua took the initiative to organize a dinner gathering with her aunt and an Xin. This was the first time the two families had met since an Xin's younger brother died in a car accident. Xiaoli broke down in tears upon seeing an Xin with her cold prosthetic limb. Just then, Xiu Feng arrived late. She had successfully lost 80 gene, approximately 40 kilograms, through dieting. Everyone almost didn't recognize her. But today's dinner gathering wasn't just about catching up. Xiaoli had also invited her former colleagues. In truth, she intended for these colleagues to help arrange marriage prospects for her daughter. Xiaoli then began boasting about Ruohua in front of everyone. She claimed Ruohua had given up her Beijing job and boyfriend for her. She even produced Ruohua's resignation letter as proof. Ruohua, feeling extremely uncomfortable, made an excuse to slip away. An Xin noticed her distress and followed her out to comfort her. Xiu Fan also disapproved of her sister's actions. Unwilling to listen any longer, she too left, intending to take an Xin away first. When Ruohua returned, she overheard her mother pleading with those old colleagues to introduce her to potential partners. After everyone had left, Ruohua reproached her mother for lying and deceiving others. But Xiaoli didn't think she was lying. She even guaranteed that within 3 days, a long line of men would be queuing up for matchmaking. Ruohua declared, "Even if you find someone, I won't marry the man you choose." Seeing Ruohua refuse to go on the blind date, Xiaoli began a hunger strike in earnest. Ruohua, utterly helpless, sought out her aunt to persuade her mother. When Xiu Fang arrived, she found her sister had fainted from starvation. The two rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. The first words out of Xiaoli's mouth upon waking were to force Ruohua into matchmaking. Xiu Feng, unable to bear it, stepped in to reason with her. But Xiaoli was stubborn. She meant what she said. She declared she would die if Ruohua didn't agree to the matchmaking. Afterward, Ruohua began meeting different men as her mother had arranged. Xiaoli, determined to find a suitable son-in-law, went so far as to create a detailed matchmaking schedule resembling a class timetable, meticulously arranging every man Ruohua would meet each day. She even color-coded them to indicate their excellence levels. Upon hearing this, Ruohua felt suffocated. She didn't want to meet 8 men in a single day. The next day, when Ruohua came to see Hu Wei, she admitted she'd been forced into the matchmaking by her mother. Hu Wei chuckled upon hearing this, as he too had returned from Beijing. This shared background gave them plenty of common ground to talk about. Hu Wei was quite taken with the pure and beautiful Ruohua, but Ruohua felt they weren't at the stage of discussing marriage yet. Shuoli, upon hearing this, felt vindicated. Back in Beijing, they had been chasing Zhou Kai to meet his parents. Now back in their hometown, they finally held the upper hand. Xiuli then took Ruohua to a cosmetic clinic for a freckle removal procedure. Unexpectedly, the nurse immediately led them to the entrance of the private genital surgery ward. It turned out Xiuli had learned Hu Wei's family preferred pure, innocent girls. Under the guise of cosmetic treatment, she tricked Ruohua into undergoing hymenoplasty surgery. Ruohua, furious, turned and stormed out. The nurse reminded her that the money had already been paid and there would be no refund. Ruohua retorted that whoever paid should be the one to undergo the procedure. She then sought out an Xin to pour out her heart, recounting an incident from her childhood. When she was 13, she and Lu Zhuo found a stray kitten, but when she brought it home, her mother not only threw the cat away but also berated her, calling her stupid and clumsy. To this day, she couldn't face Lu Zhuo, feeling guilty for betraying his trust. After living under her mother's oppression for over 20 years, Ruohua's mindset had shifted. Gradually, she began to agree with her mother's words. Seeing this, an Xin embraced her, urging her not to give up on herself. She must believe in her own strength to overcome those negative thoughts. But Ruohua believed that to defeat those thoughts, she first had to defeat her mother and break free from her control. The next day, Ruohua meticulously dressed herself up for a date with Hu Wei, deliberately revealing the location to her mother. As expected, Xiuli brought Hu Wei's mother along to watch the spectacle. Hu Wei was instantly stunned by Ruohua's beauty upon seeing her. Ruohua confessed to him that she had been in a relationship. Hu Wei truthfully shared his first experience with his senior classmate. Xiuli and Hu Wei's mother eavesdropped nearby. Hearing every word, Ruohua noticed them listening in. She began playing a game of truth or dare with Hu Wei. She casually made up stories about having dated over a dozen boyfriends, recounting every romantic escapade in detail. Hu Wei listened, utterly dumbfounded. Xiuli, fearing Hu Wei's mother might misunderstand, hurriedly explained it was all Ruohua's fabrication. But Hu Wei's mother refused to believe her, berating Ruohua as shameless. Throughout this time, Ruohua never forgot Zhou Kai. One day, she unexpectedly received a copy of a core financial journal. It featured the article she and Zhou Kai had co-authored. This made Ruohua feel even more unable to let go of Zhou Kai. That evening, she couldn't resist opening the chat window with Zhou Kai. She intended to send him a congratulatory message, but after hesitating for a long time, she still didn't send it. Just as she was about to log out, Zhou Kai sent her a message. Xiuli learned that her daughter's article had been published in the magazine. She sent it to all her relatives and friends, showing them how outstanding her daughter was. Her friends saw it and praised Ruohua for her success. Xiuli felt even more proud. Since returning from Beijing, Ruohua had been preparing for the civil service exam. The exam was scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Xiuli wanted to accompany her. Ruohua refused her outright. The reason Ruohua rejected her mother was to go to Beijing and see Zhou Kai one last time. She decided to meet Zhou Kai before the exam to resolve the lingering regret in her heart. Coincidentally, the editor-in-chief of the Beijing magazine invited her to attend a topic selection meeting. She didn't want her mother to know she still harbored feelings for Zhou Kai. The next day, Ruohua lied to her mother, claiming she needed to arrive 2 days early to familiarize herself with the exam venue. She dug out their old photos, reminiscing about the happy times with Zhou Kai. Meanwhile, Zhou Kai had already started a completely new life. To him, Ruohua was just a classmate, but Ruohua still held on to hope. Unaware Zhou Kai already had a new girlfriend. Zhou Kai, who had promised to meet Ruohua after finishing work, hadn't shown up by 7 p.m. Ruohua had no choice but to call him again. Zhou Kai explained over the phone that after the interview, the editor-in-chief had pulled him back for overtime. He suggested they might not meet tonight and instead invited Ruohua to lunch the next day. With nowhere else to go, Ruohua found herself heading to her alma mater. She recalled the beautiful memories she and Zhou Kai had left there, but she never imagined that Zhou Kai, who had lied about working late, was actually here on a date with his new girlfriend. The scene of them ice skating was exactly like when they were dating. Seeing this, Ruohua was heartbroken. She went to a bar alone to drown her sorrows. Soon, a local thug sitting nearby took notice of her, striking up a conversation and trying to take her home. Terrified, Ruohua called Lu Zhuo for help. Lu Zhuo arrived swiftly, shooed the thug away, and escorted Ruohua home, with no one to confide in. Ruohua, fueled by alcohol, poured out her story to Lu Zhuo. Her mother's so-called love had suffocated her for years. She believed staying in Beijing would free her from her mother's control. But ultimately, she couldn't withstand the harshness of reality. After Ruohua regained her composure, Lu Zhuo made her a bowl of noodles. Worried about her safety returning so late, he invited her to stay at his place. He himself would crash at a neighbor's for the night. To prevent any misunderstanding, he pulled out his phone to show he already had a girlfriend. Early the next morning, Ruohua left Beijing for her exam location. Unexpectedly, during the exam, she experienced the same symptoms as her brother. Her vision blurred, her hands trembled uncontrollably, and she felt nauseous, even vomiting. With no other choice, she asked the proctor for permission to leave. As soon as she stepped outside, she vomited uncontrollably. Facing this situation, she recalled her teacher describing her brother's exam experience. She realized she was experiencing the same psychological issues as her brother. At that moment, Xiaoli was already waiting at the entrance of the exam hall, having specially ordered a cheongsam, hoping her daughter would achieve excellent results. Soon, the day arrived for the civil service exam results to be released. Ruohua had been in a low mood ever since the last incident. She went alone to the broken bridge to clear her head. Xiaofang sent her messages for several days straight, asking about her results, but Ruohua didn't reply. She dared not go home to face her mother's disappointed expression. That evening, the moment Ruohua returned home, she saw the house in utter disarray. Xiaoli couldn't hear a word Ruohua was saying. She pulled out Ruohua's high-speed rail ticket to Beijing, and insisted Ruohua had deliberately failed the exam to return to Beijing and rekindle her relationship with Zhou Kai. She then pressured Ruohua to immediately prepare for the teacher's certification exam. Ruohua felt she couldn't endure this any longer and firmly refused her mother's demands. Returning to her room, she began plotting a countermeasure against her mother. The next day, Xiaoli was on the phone with her sister in her room. Through her sister's introduction, she met old Wang. She even tied a pretty scarf to look presentable for the meeting. At this moment, Ruohua proactively approached her mother with her upgraded matchmaking chart. She declared her willingness to go on blind dates and had even rated each potential suitor. Though taken aback, Xiaoli eagerly began arranging meetings for her daughter. Ruohua knew her mother was in constant contact with old Wang. She began criticizing her mother's shortcomings. From that day on, Ruohua embarked on her blind date journey. The first man was a mama's boy. He insisted on living with his parents after marriage. Ruohua, dissatisfied, wasted no time and stood up to leave. She wouldn't even spare the time for a cup of coffee. The second man was a penny pincher. Ruohua merely ordered cod, and he was already heartbroken. The third man was divorced with 2 kids. Ruohua was even more critical, driving him away after barely exchanging a few words. Xiaoli was furious when she found out, but Ruohua couldn't care less, adopting her mother's exact rhetoric. Later, she hid in her room, playing music to celebrate her victory. Ever since Ruohua learned her mother's way of speaking, her mother never dared to say another word to her. Xiaoli could only vent to her sister, complaining that Ruohua had become utterly unmanageable lately. That day at the movies, Ruohua accidentally drank the cola from the seat next to her. Li Bin saw how distracted she was and knew it wasn't on purpose. Throughout the entire film, Li Bin kept a watchful eye on Ruohua's mood. He desperately wanted to know what had happened to make her so deeply saddened. Only after the film ended did Ruohua notice her untouched soda still sitting untouched on her left. By the time she realized, Li Bin had already reached the stairwell entrance. Seeing Ruohua look over, Li Bin gave her a generous smile and a nod. Then he followed his friends out. On her way back, a heavy rain began to pour down. She dashed to the bus stop through the downpour when suddenly a car pulled up beside her. Li Bin offered to drive Ruohua home, but she declined. He seemed helpless, yet still got out of the car, left an umbrella for her, and drove away. The next day, Ruohua arrived as scheduled to meet her blind date. Unexpectedly, the man was the same one she'd seen at the cinema. Before they could exchange many words, Ruohua declared it wasn't a good match and stood up to leave. Ever since Li Bin had seen Ruohua at the cinema, He developed a strong interest in her. Upon learning Ruo Hua was his matchmaking candidate, he was delighted and deliberately inquired about her background. He discovered not only her dating history but also details about her dozen or so ex-boyfriends. He dismissed these as pranks Ruo Hua had concocted to resist her overbearing mother's control. His words struck a chord with Ruo Hua. At that moment, she decided to give dating Li Bin a try. The next time they met, Li Bin brought Ruo Hua to his marital home and asked if she liked the interior design. He hoped this place could become her home someday, but Ruo Hua felt they hadn't known each other long enough. She wasn't ready to settle down yet. Li Bin, however, explained his work had always been demanding, and he couldn't afford to take things step by step in a relationship. Ruo Hua was moved by Li Bin's sincerity. That night, upon returning home, she told her mother about dating Li Bin, and mentioned that Li Bin's parents wanted to arrange a meeting. Xiaoli instantly flew into a rage. She hadn't even agreed to the relationship, yet it had already progressed to meeting the parents. But Ruo Hua was resolute. Regardless of her mother's approval, she would marry Li Bin. Xiaoli, enraged by her daughter, gnashed her teeth, wailed at home, and shouted her son's name loudly. Hearing her brother's name, Ruo Hua could no longer contain herself. She laid out, point by point, the unreasonable things her mother had done to her brother. She stated that her mother had driven him to depression. Her brother had gotten into an Xian's car precisely to escape their mother. It was because of this that he had been in the car accident. All of this, every single thing, was caused by Xiaoli. It turned out that under their mother's relentless pressure, Ruo Xian had developed depression. He had long contemplated death and left a farewell message on his computer. Ruo Hua asked a classmate to access her brother's computer and discovered a video he had recorded before his death. In it, Ruo Xian poured out years of pent-up resentment and frustration. Xiaoli, under the guise of love, had constantly interfered with his studies and monitored his life. He felt suffocated by this suffocating love and longed for death. Ruo Hua watched the entire video in tears. Determined not to become another Ruo Xian, she resolved to defeat her mother. Xiaoli remained utterly blind to her own mistakes, dismissing Ruo Hua's claims as fabrications. The mother and daughter clashed fiercely over every disagreement, ending their conversation in bitter discord. The next day, Xiaoli couldn't comprehend why the daughter she had raised with such effort had turned so rebellious. With no one to confide in, she sought out her older sister. Xiao Feng had always understood her younger sister's character. She urged her not to be so overbearing, to give Ruo Hua some space, and stop treating their relationship like they were enemies. But Xiaoli remained blind to her own faults, endlessly lamenting her own hardships. Without her, Ruo Hua would have been swindled into poverty by Zhou Kai long ago. Xiao Feng suggested she meet Li Bin's parents. Instead of listening, Xiaoli blamed Ruo Hua for confirming their relationship without her approval. Xiao Feng knew her sister's stubbornness. Any more words would fall on deaf ears. Ruo Hua arrived as scheduled to meet Li Bin's parents. She lied, saying her mother had suddenly fallen ill and been hospitalized, preventing her attendance. Li Bin's parents heard this without comment. They were quite pleased with Ruo Hua. What Ruo Hua hadn't anticipated was that they had already skipped her and set a wedding date. Ruo Hua felt this was too rushed and said she needed to discuss it with her mother. She stepped out to call her mother. Her mother, still furious, told Ruo Hua to make her own decision. Upon hearing this, Xiaoli was livid. She stormed straight to the restaurant to confront Li Bin's parents. Strangely, instead of being angry, Li Bin's parents went out of their way to flatter Xiaoli. Xiaoli remained unmoved, her face stern throughout. Li Bin repeatedly emphasized that he had fallen for Ruo Hua at first sight. His parents had already prepared a wedding home and promised a generous dowry for Ruo Hua. Hearing this, Xiaoli finally brightened, yet she had her own plans. She seized the moment to suggest the groom's family help Ruo Hua secure a good job. Li Bin's mother offered to recommend Ruo Hua for a bank position after their marriage. Xiaoli's face lit up at this, agreeing to hold the wedding on the 5th day of the next month. Ruo Hua didn't care either way, as she desperately wanted to escape her mother. The next day, Ruo Hua visited the wedding home and discovered the groom's dark secret. She finally understood why Li Bin had been so eager to marry. Furious, Ruo Hua stormed out without looking back, yet Li Bin eventually dragged her back. Ruo Hua refused to hear his explanations. Seeing his cover blown, Li Bin stopped pretending. He admitted his infidelity, but Ruo Hua confessed she never truly loved him either, only coveted his family's wealth and saw marriage as a way to escape her mother's control. He declared their marriage a transaction of mutual convenience. even urging Ruohua to turn a blind eye. Ruohua had hoped marriage would free her from her mother's grip, allowing an ordinary, carefree life. She never imagined encountering Li Bin, such a shameless man. Completely disillusioned, she resolved to call off the marriage immediately, but Li Bin desperately blocked her path, demanding she attend the wedding tomorrow. If she eloped, both she and her mother would pay a heavy price. Li Bin's urgency stemmed from his desperate need to suppress his own negative rumors. It turned out Li Bin was notorious for his womanizing ways and various scandals. His parents pressured him to marry quickly. That's why Li Bin chose the submissive Ruohua. His parents had already sent out the invitations, hoping to hold a grand wedding to lessen the negative impact. Yet faced with Li Bin's threats and intimidation, Ruohua showed no sign of backing down. Li Bin still hoped to persuade her, explaining the stakes involved, but Ruohua refused to listen to his rambling and slammed the door shut. Afterward, Ruohua intended to confide in an Xin, but when she saw an Xin and Lin Yu rehearsing their dance, so engrossed they seemed lost in another world. Unwilling to disturb them, she slipped away to drown her sorrows in solitude. After rehearsal, an Xin sought out Ruohua, yet Ruohua still couldn't bring herself to reveal Li Bin's infidelity. She only reminded an Xin to attend her wedding the next day. Walking down the street, Ruohua felt utterly hopeless. Spotting a car speeding toward her in the distance, she made no attempt to move out of the way. Li Bin spotted her and immediately rushed over, pulling Ruohua to safety. Yet Ruohua couldn't accept his reckless lifestyle. Seeing this, Li Bin urged her to consider their mother. Ruohua no longer wanted to return to that dark, hopeless existence. Nor did she wish to face the disgraceful Li Bin. She found herself torn. Ruohua was eventually persuaded to accompany Li Bin to try on wedding dresses. Xiuli was deeply dissatisfied with Li Bin's family's actions. She vented her frustrations to her sister. Just then, Old Wang uncovered the truth about Li Bin's family background. Xiuli immediately called Ruohua, who was trying on dresses, and ordered her home. That night, Xiuli urged Ruohua to cancel tomorrow's wedding. Ruohua declared she had known everything all along and accepted Li Bin's actions. Xiuli had finally come to terms with it. Whatever Ruohua chose to do, she would no longer interfere. She led Ruohua to the memorial photos of her husband and son. At that moment, Ruohua completely broke down and ran out into the pouring rain. Outside, the rain fell in buckets. She had nowhere to go. She had no choice but to call Luzwa, who had feelings for her, for help. Upon hearing the news, Luzwa rushed over and brought Ruohua back home. Ruohua took a hot shower and made a major decision. She made up an excuse for Luzwa to bring her a bathrobe and deliberately left the bathroom door open, hoping he would come in. Unexpectedly, Luzwa guessed her intentions and repeatedly closed the door she opened. The two tugged at the door several times. Only when Luzwa firmly gripped the doorknob did Ruohua give up. It turned out Ruohua wanted to be with Luzwa on the eve of her wedding as a way to get back at Li Bin. In the end, the two sat down and had a heart-to-heart talk. Ruohua told Luzwa everything. She had imagined leaving Li Bin to live in Beijing, yet she knew how grueling it would be to establish herself in Beijing. No matter how Luzwa pleaded, Ruohua remained resolute. As they embraced goodbye downstairs, Li Bin watched from nearby. After Ruohua left, he seized a baseball bat and without warning knocked Luzwa to the ground. Xiuli, unable to reach Ruohua, opened her son's computer. She watched the entire video Ruoshen had left behind before his death. Learning of her son's inner anguish, Xiuli finally awakened. She vowed never to let Ruohua repeat the same mistakes. She would stop at nothing to cancel Ruohua's wedding. She immediately called Old Wang for help. Early the next morning, Xiuli rose before dawn to make wontons. She continued pleading with Ruohua to call off the wedding, but Ruohua refused to listen. Soon, the makeup artist arrived to prepare Ruohua. Just then, Luzwa video called. Only then did Ruohua learn that Li Bin had attacked Luzwa the previous night, but now it was too late. Downstairs, Li Bin arrived with his wedding party to collect the bride. Calling off the wedding was no longer an option. Thus, surrounded by neighbors and well-wishers, Ruohua stepped into the wedding car. She accepted her fate with a blank expression. Meanwhile, Xiuli called Old Wang to execute her plan. As the wedding procession passed through the park, Old Wang deliberately blocked the road. Li Bin spotted him and ordered his driver to handle the situation. But the moment the driver stepped out, he spoke rudely to Old Wang. Without breaking a sweat, Old Wang subdued him effortlessly. Seeing this, Li Bin didn't want to cause trouble. The instant he got out of the car, Old Wang rushed over with a group of elderly women. Li Bin had no idea who this old man was. Old Wang had the square dance ladies surround the entire procession. Amid the chaos, he found Ruo Hua and revealed everything Xiao Li had done. Old Wang kept a close eye on the situation behind him. Seeing things were nearly settled, he left Li Bin with a parting piece of advice and walked away with a flourish. When Li Bin opened the car door, he discovered the beautiful bride had turned into his mother-in-law. Ultimately, the wedding ended in farce. Ruo Hua went to Beijing and found mutual affection with Lu Zua. Xiao Li also built her own life, deeply in love with old Wang. But Ruo Hua still worried about her mother and called her. Seeing her daughter finally call, Xiao Li was overcome with joyful tears. Mother and daughter finally put their differences behind them, and so the story comes to an end.